And sure enough, I don't know if you remember, you needed the one vote, and he didn't vote for it.
Yeah.
And I went up to him afterwards, and I said, you know something? We know where you live, and we're going to protest in front of your house every day.
Mm-hmm.
And he took it like, we know where you live, I'm going to kill you or something, threaten you. So he went to Montez, who was the head of the PRB, and said, I want you to send the state police and stop this guy, because that was, we were in Springfield and I was traveling back to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wanted me to be arrested, but Montez said, no, don't do that, that wouldn't work, But, so that was, the PRB was so frustrating, because we would get close and then we wouldn't get it, and then we would lose votes, and we had to play the games with these people. It was terrible, but I never thought about giving up, because you weren't going to be able to give up, so what was I going to do, walk away from you?
Yeah.
And one other thing I want to add about the judge in your case, because it's not really recognized, but that judge, after he retired, yes, they forced him off, and he went back to Arizona, and sure enough, they convened a grand jury, and they subpoenaed him to a grand jury to testify. And he went to his garage and pulled out a shotgun and blew his brains out. So
they didn't want to face the music that I faced.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
He was.
Welcome to another episode of Unshackled Building Bridges. Today we have Michael Deutsch with us, and civil rights leader, civil rights attorney of over 50 years of experience. And I'm going to let Ronnie, my partner, take over, because they've been over 30 years. He fought for Ronnie's case, and they know each other for a long time, and I feel that it's only right for you to lead off, Ronnie.
Yep. So I want to start out by just making a statement that I ask you here today to talk about our journey of your advocating for my freedom, and as an attorney, your countless number of clients that you had also took decades of fighting the criminal justice system to gain release for all of us. You've been, like you just said, close to 50 years. So
over 50 years, almost 55 years.
Wow. And still sneaking around doing cases probably. So my first question I would ask is, what do you regard as your most favorite victory in your career against the criminal justice system? Which case do you look like we really made an impact on the criminal justice system?
Well, I've had a few cases that were significant. I represented the Attica prisoners who rebelled in 1971 in New York State Prison, and a lot of them they held the prison and were negotiating for better conditions and better treatment, and when the negotiations fell apart, they sent in the state police, and they slaughtered 12 of their own people and 29 prisoners, and beat a lot of people. And then after that, they indicted a bunch of people and charged them with criminal activity. And so we had a long struggle. Lawyers came from all over the country to defend them. And ultimately, it went on for 25 years, because after first we were trying to get them to stop torturing the prisoners. Right after they retook the prison, they had people beaten, and they made them run through gauntlets of guards with clubs beating them. And one of the people who turned out to be my client and my dear friend, Frank Big Black Smith, he was the head of security. They put him on a table nude and put a football under his chin, and they beat him and said if he dropped the football, they'd kill him.
Wow.
And they tortured him for hours on a table.
And that lasted 25 years
Well, first we had to get them treatment, then they brought indictments. Like 5 years later, they brought indictments against the leaders and others, 43 indictments, and we defended them in the criminal cases. We won most of those cases, almost all of them, and then the governor ultimately ordered all the cases to be dropped after we won several trials of defending the prisoners. And after that, we brought a civil rights case for all the damages and treatment that they endured. And that went on for 12, 15 years. So the whole thing went on from 1971 till 2022.
Whoa.
So that was a very long case and a lot of notoriety, and it really put the prison struggle in the minds of a lot of people who weren't, conscious of
I
what
think
goes
you guys
on.
won money for the families of the,
we
the
won,
guards and all that too?
$12 million.
We won over $400,000 in terms of ultimately settling the case after all those years. So people got money. There are people who lost their leg in that thing, and other people were killed, and so their families got money. So that was a long struggle we did.
Struggle.
Yeah. And of course, your case is right up there.
So I was going to ask you just mentioned that took all the way from the 1970s to the 2020. But I was going to ask you which case took the longest time for you to get victory. I wonder if anybody was longer than mine. Being that, if the audience don't know, I spent 47 years in prison, so that one sounds like it's close to my case like that.
Yeah.
For the victory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was your longest one besides mine? That's it? Other than that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a kind of continuing cases around people who are in prison, starting in 1971. And even before that, I represented the Black Panthers down in Carbondale who had a shootout with the police.
Wow.
And they were charged with 47 counts of attempt murder. And we had a trial in southern Illinois and Murfreesboro, Illinois. And we had an all-white jury, and they acquitted all of the defendants, saying they were acting in self-defense.
Wow.
So that was a big victory. And then a lot of I worked a lot on the Puerto Rican struggle.
I was going to ask you about that too.
Yeah, and it began when I first met Rafael Cancel Miranda in Marion Federal Prison, and he told me all about taught me about Puerto Rico and the independence struggle, and then I went to meet in the different prisons his co-defendants, Oscar Collazo and Irvin Flores, and so that was to get them out of prison was a big struggle, and we went on for years, but ultimately we were able to get them free because Jimmy Carter gave them an unconditional release because we had a campaign, we brought a lawsuit on their behalf, and that was a big struggle that went on for a decade almost. So that was it. And then I also done a lot of work around the conditions of people in prison. So one of the cases I went to the Supreme Court of the U.S. that we won in the Supreme Court, which was about somebody who died in Terre Haute prison because they didn't give him proper medical care. And the Supreme Court for the first time said that you could sue under the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment for denial of medical care in prison. And that was the first time that you could actually sue.
Yeah, landmark.
Landmark case. So that was a big case. And then I also worked on at Marion, they developed these control units, which they would classify someone, not because they did anything in the prison, but because of what they were convicted of on the street, or whether they were recognized in the prison by the other prisoners, and they classified them. They didn't charge them with doing anything wrong in the prison. They classified them and put them in this control unit, which was indefinite segregation.
Yeah, like TAMs, or marginalized, they kill somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah, we went through that with my parole.
Yeah.
You fought the parole board all the time, and every time we went to the parole board, they kept saying, you're the same 18-year-old, you're the same guy, so they lock you in, you're in the gang, and you're never getting out, and so they marginalize them people and lock them in.
Yeah.
So they created those units.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about, because you mentioned Rafael Miranda and meeting them people, they were independent, they were fighting for like an independence for the rights of Puerto Rico and stuff like that. So meeting them, and then because as a young man, when I was young, they started a school in my neighborhood in Humboldt Park called Rafael Miranda Cancel High School, and it was an alternative school for when a regular person in a high school would get thrown out of school for delinquency. That school offered you, through Jose Lopez and his program and Reverend Torres, it offered you to at least get a high school diploma. You wouldn't go void from having that. So I recognized the name. I was going to ask you, what did it feel like? There's two things that it comes to my mind. What did it feel like for you to be able to reach a sitting president, and then to get a sitting president to grant a clemency and gain liberty of that magnitude? That's as high as you can go, I think. You know?
We had a movement that was created in support of their freedom, and it was broad, and it was in Puerto Rico. They were involved, and even international human rights lawyers supported it. So we had a lot of support, and we were able to convince the Justice Department and ultimately President Carter to give them unconditional release, because they wouldn't accept parole. They said they're not criminals, and they don't recognize the U.S. court. Wow. And yet, they still got released unconditionally, no parole.
Yeah, so the second part of that is, I was a 9-10-year-old boy when all that was going on in my environment, and a reverend actually opened that storefront in the neighborhood behind the grammar school that we went to, and brought kids in for after-school program and all that, and he was part of that movement with you to help get them released. And upon them being released, I was in the prison system, but for me to hear that when they came home, they went straight to that church, First Congressional Church.
Yes, Reverend Torres, right?
Reverend Torres' church. And I just sat there and thought, man, everything that I seen as a child that you just heard about, I wasn't really part of it. You would march and do things, but you're a child. You don't know the magnitude of it. Those were adults. And to see them go home to that place, what a struggle, I sat there and said, wow, there's, when my brother told me, so it was something. So
talk about your brother. I like to ask those. You said, how did you meet Ronnie? I mean, how did it come about? Now,
Ronnie's brother Paul came to see me, and maybe he got through Jose Lopez, I don't know, but he said I had a brother in the prison, and he really needs help, and I said, well, let me check it out, and I went to see him and talked to him, and I realized that he had gotten a gross injustice in his case. He was 18 years old. They gave him 200 to 600 years. But the thing that really got me involved in the case was the judge. The judge he had, Frank Wilson, was a crook. And there was a high-profile case of a mafia guy in front of him, and the judge acquitted him of all the charges in a bench trial, in front of him. And it was very fishy. And then here comes Ronnie, and there was all this, after he acquitted this mafia hitman, there was all this attacks on the judge. They said he shouldn't have done it, and that they were going to investigate him, and the newspapers were challenging him. And so here comes Ronnie, the next kid, 18 years old. He doesn't have any supporters, and the judge has got to clean up his reputation now. Right. And the courtroom was filled with cops in uniform. So he's not going to go against the cops again. So he just gives him a 200 to 600 year sentence when he's never been in prison before. He never had any convictions of that kind. And so that's what interests me in this case. I mean, I liked Ronnie at the beginning, but also this is a case of importance.
So you like all those cases that are important and stuff, but was there ever a case that stands out that maybe you lost or that you have a lot of emotions for? Is Ronnie that case, or is there another case that where you felt, because it got to a point where Ronnie was there for a long time. You guys were 30 years together.
Well, there were cases that I lost that I thought I should have won or I was upset about. But usually I was able to get the people a lesser sentence, or at least, do an appeal for them. So, and you know, I worked at the People's Law Office in Chicago, and also at one point for 4 or 5 years, I was the legal director for the Center for Constitutional Rights, which is a group in New York that's like the People's Law Office, but it does all kinds of different human rights cases. And I was the legal director to, you know, tell them, you know, what cases to take and figure it out and help the legal staff. So, I don't remember all the cases that I lost. I try to forget about them.
It's not a good track record.
Yeah.
So I was grateful that my brother was able to bring you the first time, you know, that you decided to participate and strategize. And when you think about all the material that came out that you found on you, and then Rob Warden came later when you asked him to help. And Rob Warden was a news journalist guy, and the news media were after my judge, the state attorneys were after my judge, the senators were after my judge, the FBI was after my judge. Everybody wanted him to retire. And they knew he did something, but they couldn't prove it. So the news media would ask me as I was going through trial. But I was a young kid, I didn't know what it meant, you know. And for me to find out, my prosecutor was the brother to the person that paid the judge. I'm seeing all this mix-up going on. But I was constitutionally illiterate, not knowing the law. So I had to start studying the law to advocate for myself, start writing in petitions and all that stuff like that. And our relationship started in the long run, where instead of talking, I would write you a proposal. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So it ended up in, what do they call it, 21401? 21401 or 21402 petition that we filed. So I had asked you one time, because the prison review board kept doing the same thing. And I seen the writing on the wall. And I was saying, Mike, we got to file the 21401 on the corrupt judge. That's treason. That's he violated his oath. He did all that. And I remember you like, well, let me ask my friend, and let me see what we can do from there. And that's how we met. How I met Charles. He sent you a email, and you sent me a copy of it. And all it said was file it. So that started the track record. And then I'll talk about it in a minute, but we had said let's file the issue on the judge and the issue on the sentencing. So that's what took us off in that direction. So I'll come back to that because it was an important person that we didn't speak about recently. I haven't spoke about her, which played a role in there too, which was Shubra Ori. You know, she played a good role of me meeting her and how she got the job with you. But I wanted to ask you this. I never knew what triggered you to get into the civil rights attorneyship, you know, of doing that, because I grew up in 1968. I was 10 years old, and I watched all the riots in the street and all that stuff going on. You've seen all that power to the people. You've seen the National Democratic Convention, you know, all this stuff go on. And for you, Jeffrey Haas, and Flint Taylor to come up with and say, we're going to be People's Law Office, that was a big word in the 1960s. They even had the music, up with people. You know, the Christian churches doing that. So it was a big movement. So what triggered you to mainline that?
Well, the People's Law Office was started in 1969, and it was really around the murder of Fred Hampton, the leader of the Chicago, Illinois Black Panther Party. But what
cornered you in that?
Yeah,
to staple it down.
What was the thing that organized me to join the People's Law Office? Because when I got out of law school, I clerked for a federal judge in the Court of Appeals, the Federal Court of Appeals. Otto Kerner, who used to be the
governor.
Yeah, he used to be the governor of Illinois. And at that time, while I was clerking, the Chicago conspiracy trial was going on in the floor, couple floors below where I was, and that was a case against political anti-war activists who were charged with crossing state lines to cause a riot. And it was all these activists that were working against the war, and they were all kind of focused on them. They were charged, and this trial was going on, and they had these two lawyers, William Kunstler and Leonard Weinglass, who were fighting for these young activists. And in fact, at one point, the judge was so upset with one of the people that was charged, who was the only black person charged in the case, Bobby Seale, and the judge put him at the defense table with a gag around him, so he couldn't speak out.
That was a Black Panther, Bobby Seale.
Yeah, Bobby Seale was one of the leaders of the Black Panthers, and his lawyer wasn't there, and he said, "I can't go without my lawyer," and the judge said, "No, you can have these lawyers, just be quiet." And when he wasn't going to be quiet, they bound and gagged him in the courtroom. So I would go down there and watch the trial. I would go down the back way and the marshals would let me in. And I said, oh man, this is what I want to do. I want to defend people who are fighting for justice. And so after watching that trial and watching those lawyers, I decided that this is the kind of law I wanted to practice. And then I met some people from the People's Law Office, and they said, why don't you join us? And by 1971, I was there working on defending the Panthers in Carbondale. Yeah. And then I did Attica, and then I did all these other cases, all over.
Movements.
Yeah.
So most of the time, after that much action and that much attorneyship, a lot of attorneys go on to be judges and all that. You ever thought about going to be a judge?
No, they would never let me be a judge. No.
Let him go, huh? Let him go.
No.
Won the federal acquittal for Muhammad Salah?
Yeah, Muhammad Salah. That was a Palestinian that was charged by the government, and he was arrested in Israel. He was tortured by the Israelis.
Wow.
And then he did 4 or 5 years in prison in Israel. And then when they came back after doing that, they charged him in the U.S. courts. And so I knew some people in the Palestinian movement, and they asked me to represent them, and therefore I represented him in this trial with another defendant. And he was charged with RICO, Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act. They were saying he was part of a corrupt organization, racketeering organization. They said he was involved with Hamas. Mm-hmm. And so we had a long trial, 3 months trial, and we educated the jury about Palestine and why people are treated that way in Palestine, and why his confession was obtained under torture. And for the first time in any court, they were forced to bring in the torturers to testify, to justify the statements that he gave were not under torture.
We're going to hold on to that thought about torturers. Because in the end, we're going to talk about that. So I want to ask you another thing about, like in my case, it took decades to accomplish the victory that we finally got. And I just want to know what kept you going in there, because in 2009 or 2010, I think it was, or 2008 somewhere, towards them years that they tried to arrest you in the prison review board, arguing because whatever circumstances the board members had made with civil servants in the community that will help if, so they had negotiations or some kind of friendships going on, and you confronted them with it and they wanted to arrest you. So we came to the conclusion, you had said, hey, I think, it's hurting me, so you wanted to say, hey, we'll put a woman in there, we'll get another lawyer. So what kept you just because you didn't give up, we never gave up, but I was stuck, I had to keep going. I had no choice to keep going. So, that you guys kept going, and the unique part about it was when we went to the 214-01, I think it was 2017 or 18, and you came in the bullpen, you were telling me, hey, if the judge asks you if you have any money, you don't have no money, if you have this, and I was thinking, uh-oh, I don't have no money, so I said, uh-oh, I don't have no more lawyer, they're asking for money, I have no money, but you were asking for them to declare me indigent to pay some kind of, fee where the state would pay the fee. So I thought, uh-oh. So what kept you just driving through with no money because you didn't get nothing.
No, I didn't
You know,
ever ask you for
you
money.
didn't-
I
you
wasn't
didn't.
thinking about money. Yeah.
So that's something to have a. And I remember I used to jokingly say it. Now I think about it, I shouldn't have said it, but I used to tell him, "Man, Mike, you get me out of here, I'll shovel your snow for the rest of my life." And now I'm home. I'm like, man, I hope it don't snow. I might have to go shovel the snow.
Right.
So what kept you just driving and driving and the thing, not only driving to get results for me, but strategizing something new all the time. It was never the same. Let's just go back to the board again. You declared way back in 2007, 2008, this is a sham. This is not going to make it. Where other attorneys, oh, we'll go there and they'll be fine. Just put the material up and everything fine. Where no, it's not going to work. We got to go somewhere else.
Well, I had a lot of experience at that time fighting for justice, and that was what I did, and that's what I said I was going to do when I joined the People's Law Office. And so, I knew that this was going to be a tough fight, and so at one point, I mentioned this to you before, I knew the alderman, Luis Gutierrez, and Luis Gutierrez knew one of the people on the PRB. I forget his name right now, but and he told Luis that if Ronnie needs the vote for him to get out, I will give him that vote. What was his name?
Diaz.
Diaz, yeah. And sure enough, I don't know if you remember, you needed the one vote, and he didn't vote for it.
Yeah.
And I went up to him afterwards, and I said, you know something? We know where you live, and we're going to protest in front of your house every day. And he took it like, we know where you live, I'm going to kill you or something, threaten you. So he went to Montez, who was the head of the PRB, and said, I want you to send the state police and stop this guy, because we were in Springfield and I was traveling back to Chicago. And so he wanted me to be arrested, but Montez said, no, don't do that, that wouldn't work, But so that was, the PRB was so frustrating, because we would get close and then we wouldn't get it, and then we would lose votes, and we had to play the games with these people. It was terrible, but I never thought about giving up, because you weren't going to be able to give up. So what was I going to do, walk away from you?
Yeah.
And one other thing I want to add about the judge in your case, because it's not really recognized, but that judge, after he retired, yes, they forced him off, and he went back to Arizona, and sure enough, they convened a grand jury, and they subpoenaed him to a grand jury to testify. And he went to his garage and pulled out a shotgun and blew his brains out. So
they didn't want to face the music that I faced.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
He was, and the unique, we had used that in some of our petition writing, because later on in my other cases that we were in front of the judge, they kept telling you that, Mike, you don't know the frame of mind that the judge was in. They said that to you. One time they told him, you don't know what frame of mind the judge was in when he shot himself, and Mike started cursing. Well, he shot himself in the head. I do know what frame of mind he was in, So it was frustrating that they didn't give us that part. And that was the most unique thing that was standing out of an injustice. That was an injustice with cake all over it.
Yes.
And then they kept turning around. We might give you something on sentencing if because the sentence is crazy. We might give you something on that, but they kept steering us away from, don't mention the judge thing. And that brings me to think about Shubra, that, she was part of your People's Law Office. She came in, you hired her and brought her in there, and she helped work with you to present the 214-01. So I never got a chance to thank her. She's far away, to say, thank you for the participating of putting that work and the research in, coming to the prison, bringing fuel to the fire. Like she was young, and like she was saying, you'll see what I'll do. You'll see what I could do. And I remember the first time that she had came to Dixon in a program, and I met her, and she said she was an attorney, And then I asked her, did you ever do pro bono work? She said, no. Did you ever do a PRB board hearing with a C number? She said, no. I said, well, come to my hearing and you'll learn. You won't, whatever somebody tells you it is, you'll learn firsthand. And then she did, and you hired her, and it was from there on, you know, she took a stance, and it was, you know, she didn't, in the end, she wasn't there because she lived far away for the victory, but I just want to mention her name, that she played a role in the writing of that. So the last question I got for you is this one here, and we spoke about this before. What's retirement look like? Are you truly retired or doing a little work here and there?
I am doing some work consulting with people who are taking on cases that I wouldn't actually take on from the People's Law Office, and they're really going after the Palestinian protesters.
Wow.
And, yeah, they're charging them with, you know, first of all, they're suing them civilly. These Zionist lawyers have brought these lawsuits against these Palestinian activists who are merely protesting around what's going on, and they're accusing them of providing material support for terrorism. So I know those cases, so I've been consulting with the lawyers on those cases and some other stuff, and it's, you know, after doing this work for so many years, you kind of miss it, you know?
Yeah.
You miss the struggle, and you miss helping people, but, you know, I turned 80 years old, and
It's hard to move around.
yeah.
So yeah, you want to get involved. So you basically, the same thing's going on 50 years ago, 60 years ago. You know, the struggle of, you know, politics and the countries and the fights in other countries, and it just goes round and round. And anybody that tries to help these people, they're wrong. So it's just, there's no balance. It never ends.
You know, yeah.
And if it wasn't for attorneys like you or the People's Law Office that come forward, and it takes 10, 20 years, you know, to bring light to a situation where they finally realize, okay, we'll give it to you. You know, it shouldn't take that long. It shouldn't have took, in my situation, 47 years for them to realize in the court to let me get resentenced. And it was Charles Hoffman, your partner of the years back, and Jennifer Sobel taking me to the Prison Review Board, and basically a lot of things got exposed. She came about with a video from damn protests of In Their Hands, and that just shows blatant, you know, disregard for what's supposed to be a system. But Charles Hoffman was like, to me, a legal genius, that he seen things in my situation that I was the person locked up for this situation, and it didn't even dawn on me. And it was the part about the judge never putting which degree of my case it should have been. He just was under such a strain from taking a bribe and all that pressure. And that Charles pointed out to the courts that because it's a law enforcement case situation, it should be the extreme. It should, and I had all my appeals processed through being charged with the extreme. And when he brought it to the attention of the facts don't warrant it, it just, you know, brought different light.
But, you know, one of the key things that happened, because, you know, we had those hearings in your case, you know, in front of that judge, and people testified.
Maldonado.
Yeah, Maldonado. And remember that woman that you met and knew you, used to visit you, testified? I can't remember her name now.
Yeah, Allie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had a hearing, and I felt like the judge was going to give us it.
So did I.
And then all of a sudden he said, "Oh no, I can't. You know, you get to go to the parole board, and that's all you get."
Yeah.
So it was.
I remember the day, because it was a Zoom meeting and not in person, when he was going to give you the decision.
Yeah.
And he had said the higher courts are going to have to do this. He wasn't going to do it.
Yeah, he had no guts.
And then he offered you, if you want to write a re-opinion, you know, like a re-opinion to maybe he'll consider, and you had cursed him out on there. I said, here we go again. You had cursed him out, tell him I wouldn't give you the freaking time of day to rewrite an
So,
opinion.
Mike, you being retired and everything, if you had a chance to come back and fight for something or change something in the criminal system, what would that be?
Well, I think my experiences around prisons, I would really try to do something around these prisons, how they're, you know, how the treatment and the conditions in the prisons are, you know, terrible, and I would be involved in trying to figure out a way to change the prison system, which is a tough job, but it's something that I really did a lot of time with. In terms of working around that, you know, and also there's other cases that I would be involved in, but I gotta watch it, you know. I can't get before you know it, I'll be back in there, and you know it's stressful.
Yeah, you want to pull in. So I was, you know, jokingly but not jokingly, is that if you want to come, well, you're not going to come out of retirement, but as my time goes on a little bit longer, my case still sits in the Torture Inquiry Commission, and it's docketed in there, so they know in the transcripts there's torture involved in the case, and it makes a big difference because the judge allowed evidences from torture to go into the case. They would take the time all the way back.
Yeah.
So it's coming to the point, they got a huge grant, I believe, that they operate of in this Torture Inquiry Commission that they operate to there, and they have, I don't know, maybe 300, 400 cases that they're just sitting on. And I want to study it pretty soon and get some help to get an answer, a finality to it, because if the courts ruled in my situation right now to release me because of you proving cause, and I remember you proved the first time around cause, and they said, but you didn't prove prejudice. And then you turn around, prove cause and prejudice.
And we still couldn't win.
And we couldn't win. And it eventually got me.
Well, you know how one of the ways that we won ultimately was Jennifer had a relationship with Kim Fox, and when we got sent back again for another hearing, you know, Jennifer went to Fox and she agreed to give you time served.
Those were two exceptional moves that Jennifer, outside the box thinking, and took me there, was to get Kim Fox to say, you know, that a person's supposed to be released, and that the state attorney's office is not supposed to retry them. They're supposed to find out what did they do while they were incarcerated. So she agreed and said she's not going to oppose me anymore. That was a humongous move. And then for Jennifer to go and sit down with Thomas Breen and bring him forward, and for him to come forward and go to the Prison Review Board saying it's astounding that this is still going on. I can't believe it. So all those things, what you did, what Charles Hoffman, what Jennifer did, when you three teamed up, that broke the combination, you know. But the thing is, if down the line, if you come across it, think about what can I do for this torture inquiry thing to provoke them to that, because I believe the bottom line should have never been a murder charge in the first place, and it should have been a reckless homicide, and that constitutes 14 years, and I spent 40 or 30 extra years for politics.
Exactly.
And so from this political standpoint, and then they marginalized me, labeled me, and done all these things that they done. So like Gilbert asked, what do you want to do from the criminal justice system? Those are the things that I want to change, that they don't keep doing this. Like when they find out a person's DNA don't match a case and they still hold them 20 years longer. Doesn't make sense. They just, people won't admit to the wrong and correct it, and they'll let it just go on. And the people suffering on the other side, because we have families too.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just political.
It's a lot of corruption.
Yeah, it's in the indifferences. So that's for us to change that for the criminal justice. So I want to close with Jennifer and Charles Hoffman with a scripture that it fits. If you want to say something before we close.
I want to just ask you if there's someone out there listening, a young lawyer probably, or someone that wants to get into civil rights movements or stuff like that. Is there any kind of advice or anything you would like to tell them?
Well, there's an organization broader than the People's Law Office called the National Lawyers Guild, and they have programs for young lawyers to get involved. They monitor police demonstrations, police brutality. They go out and talk to people about their rights under the Constitution. So I would suggest a young lawyer who's interested in getting involved in the struggle for justice to contact the National Lawyers Guild. And they can mention my name and
Okay.
Michael Deutsch.
yeah.
Michael Deutsch. So my scripture is, and it's in Matthew, they call them the Beatitudes, and it says, blessed is he that goes after righteousness, he will be fulfilled. And I used that scripture because you kept going after righteousness, your career, Charles Hoffman after that, Jennifer hasn't stopped, and that's her whole program, helping people. So I say that because watching your success and her success and Charles Hoffman's success, that scripture fits.
Good.
So I thank you
Great.
for your time. I appreciate you coming around a second time because we've made a malfunction, but everything's fine, and we'll be seeing this very soon.
Okay, great.
Okay, Mike,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
for your time, Ronnie. Thank you for your time. This is Unshackled Building Bridges. Until our next episode, stay put and God bless.
Yes.
Ronnie's seen it all from the inside walls. Gil got a vision that still stands tall. We don't beg for seats, we build our own. Bridge by bridge, we're bringing them home. Yeah.